Welcome, brave souls. Tonight we delve into the chilling tale of the cursed doll, an artifact bound by dark forces and haunted whispers. Once this story unfolds, you won't escape its grasp. Shadows move, secrets stir, and fear takes hold. Watch if you dare. But beware, not everyone walks away unchanged.
It was a chilly autumn evening when I first stumbled upon the doll. I was exploring an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town, a place that had been forgotten by time. The house, draped in shadows and ivy, had a certain allure that I couldn't resist. As I stepped inside, the floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Cobwebs hung like curtains in every corner. I was searching for something, anything that might reveal the history of this forsaken place. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, I found it. Sitting on a dusty, broken chair was an old porcelain doll. Its eyes, a deep, piercing blue, seemed to follow my every move. There was something unsettling about the way it looked at me, but I brushed it off as my imagination. The doll was exquisite in its craftsmanship. It had delicate features with curls of dark hair framing its pale face. Its dress, though tattered and worn, hinted at a past elegance. I couldn't help but feel drawn to it, as if it was calling out to me. Without thinking, I picked up the doll, feeling its cold porcelain skin against my fingers. A shiver ran down my spine, but I dismissed it as the chill of the room. I decided to take it with me, believing it to be a valuable antique. As I left the house, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the darkened windows. The doll was heavy in my backpack, almost as if it didn't want to leave its home. That night I placed the doll on a shelf in my study, thinking nothing more of it. I sat down to read, but my mind kept wandering back to those blue eyes. They seemed to be etched into my memory, lingering in the back of my mind. Just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard a faint noise, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. My eyes shot open and I glanced at the doll. It hadn't moved, but the room felt different, colder somehow. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination playing tricks on me. The following day, I went about my usual routine, trying to put the events of the previous night out of my mind. But as the hours passed, I noticed strange things happening around the house. Objects weren't where I had left them. Doors I knew I had closed were mysteriously open. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I entered a room, I felt a pair of unseen eyes on me. My heart would race, and I'd find myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone or something behind me. The doll remained on the shelf, its blue eyes fixed in that unsettling stare. I began to wonder if I had made a mistake bringing it into my home. But whenever I tried to move it, something held me back, an irrational fear that gripped my heart. One evening, as I sat in the study, the room grew colder. The light from the lamp flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then I heard it again, a faint whisper, clearer this time. It was coming from the direction of the doll. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, as if it was trying to tell me something. Terrified, I grabbed the doll, intending to throw it away. But the moment I touched it, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room spun, and I felt a deep sense of dread, as if I was teetering on the edge of something dark and dangerous. I collapsed into a chair, the doll still in my hands. The whispering had stopped, but the silence was even more unnerving. I couldn't understand why I felt such fear, why this doll, an inanimate object, seemed to have such a hold over me. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the doll's presence in the room, as if it was watching me, waiting for something. The air was thick with unease, and I knew that whatever was happening was far from over. Determined to understand what was going on, I began researching the history of the doll. I scoured old records and local folklore, hoping to find some clue as to why it seemed so alive. The more I dug, the more disturbing the information became. I discovered that the house where I found the doll had once belonged to a wealthy family, the Larsons. They were well known in the town, but their story was tragic. The daughter Elizabeth had died under mysterious circumstances, and soon after the family fell apart. Rumors circulated that the doll had been Elizabeth's favorite toy, a gift from her mother. After her death, the doll was said to be cursed, haunted by the spirit of the girl. People in the town believed that anyone who possessed the doll would be plagued by misfortune. I didn't believe in curses, but the strange occurrences in my home were becoming harder to ignore. The more I read, the more I felt a deepening sense of fear. What if the stories were true? What if I had brought something evil into my home? My nights were filled with nightmares, visions of a little girl, her face pale and lifeless, standing at the foot of my bed. She would whisper my name, her voice cold and echoing in the darkness. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in terror. During the day, I would try to convince myself it was all in my head. But the doll was always there, a constant reminder that something was very wrong. Its blue eyes seemed to hold secrets, dark and twisted, that I was too afraid to uncover. I tried to get rid of it. Once I even took it to the edge of town, intending to leave it in the woods. But as I drove away, I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and dread. I couldn't leave it behind. It was as if the doll had become a part of me. I brought it back home, placing it back on the shelf where it had always been. But now, every time I looked at it, I felt a deep, consuming fear. The doll wasn't just a toy. It was something far more sinister, something that was slowly consuming me. Things escalated quickly after that. The strange occurrences became more frequent, more violent. Objects would fly off shelves, lights would flicker and burst, and doors would slam shut on their own. My once peaceful home had become a place of terror. I started hearing voices, whispers in the middle of the night, calling my name, telling me things I didn't want to hear. They weren't just coming from the doll anymore, they were all around me, echoing through the halls, taunting me. Sleep became a distant memory. I was constantly on edge, jumpy and paranoid. I could feel the doll's presence everywhere, its cold blue eyes watching my every move. The sense of dread was overwhelming, and I knew I couldn't go on like this. One night I woke up to find the doll at the foot of my bed. I hadn't put it there, and I knew for a fact that it had been on the shelf when I went to sleep. My heart raced as I stared at it, fear gripping me like a vice. It was then that I realized the doll wasn't just haunting my home. It was haunting me. I could feel its malevolent energy seeping into my very soul, twisting my thoughts, making me doubt my sanity. I knew I had to do something before it was too late. I decided to confront whatever was inside the doll. I gathered what little courage I had left and sat down with it, determined to make it stop. I spoke to it, demanded that it leave me alone, that it return to wherever it had come from. But as I spoke, the room grew colder, the shadows darker. The doll's eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. I could feel the darkness closing in, suffocating me, driving me to the brink of madness. In a desperate attempt to end it, I grabbed the doll and threw it into the fireplace. The flames roared to life, consuming it in an instant. But as the fire burned, I heard a scream, a high-pitched, anguished wail that echoed through the house. The doll was gone, but the fear remained. In the days that followed, the house was eerily quiet. The strange occurrences stopped, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. It was as if a heavy weight had been removed from my shoulders. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. I tried to move on, to forget about the doll and the horrors it had brought into my life. But the memories lingered, haunting me in the quiet moments. I could still hear the whispers sometimes, faint and distant, like echoes from a nightmare. My friends noticed the change in me. I was no longer the person I had been before I found the doll. There was a darkness in me now, a shadow that followed me everywhere I went. I was quieter, more withdrawn, constantly looking over my shoulder. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something on the shelf where the doll had once sat. It was a small, charred piece of porcelain, barely recognizable. My heart skipped a beat, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I picked it up, feeling the familiar coldness of the porcelain in my hand. The room seemed to darken around me, and I could feel the fear creeping back in. The whispers started again. faint but unmistakable, calling my name, telling me it wasn't over. Panic set in as I realized that the doll, or at least part of it, had somehow survived. The fear that had once consumed me returned with a vengeance, stronger than ever. I knew that I would never truly be free of it, that it would haunt me for the rest of my life. In desperation, I buried the piece of porcelain in the garden, hoping that would be enough to silence the whispers, to end the curse once and for all. But deep down I knew it was futile. The doll, or whatever evil it contained, was far beyond my understanding. And so I live in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the whispers to return. The doll may be gone, but the curse remains. It's a part of me now, a darkness that I can never escape. The cursed doll may have been destroyed, but its legacy lives on, in me.
The story may have ended, but nightmares have a way of clinging to you, following you into the dark. Tonight, when the shadows lengthen and you feel that creeping dread, remember, some nightmares don't end when you wake up. If this story left you uneasy and you crave more terror, hit the like and subscribe button. The real nightmare is only just beginning.